People ran out of the room when he said that.
That's hilarious.
So that is an example of extreme. Don't have a bad conclusion. When you have people running away from you, that would be an indicator that you have not successfully concluded.
In today's episode, we dive into the crucial skill of public speaking, a vital tool for any entrepreneur. Whether you're pitching to investors, leading your team, or representing your brand, the ability to deliver clear, persuasive speeches can significantly impact your business success.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Ryan. How are you doing today?
Doing brilliantly. What about you, Professor Palin?
I'm very busy. I understand you had a big change of life last week.
Certainly. The biggest change of life, one might say.
What I have a question for you is, how did you convince your new bride to let you do this recording during your honeymoon?
Yeah. Priorities, right?
For those of the audience that don't understand, we have pre-recorded this, so you have not been married yet.
We're a few weeks out.
Ryan, today I wanted to talk about a topic that, again, is something that I personally am very interested in. It's how do you give a speech to an audience? We've talked about doing pitches to investors and other forms of communication, but specifically there's opportunities for entrepreneurs to get up in front of a large group and make a presentation speech. And it's something that if they're not doing, I encourage them to try to do that because that is great exposure.
It is fantastic exposure. I highly encourage it as well. I think public speaking actually ranks, this might be an outdated statistic, but I think it ranks as the number one fear in America. So going into the episode, I think it's important we acknowledge that this can be very intimidating.
To give a comparison, dying is number 7 fear.
Yeah, there we go. You're also listening, I think this is helpful background for our listeners, to two people that quite enjoy public speaking. I've seen you give dozens of public speeches and you're fantastic at it. And I really enjoy that feeling as well.
But it's a skill developed because when I was a young person starting off, I was not comfortable speaking in public. I used to get extremely nervous to the point where now I believe I'm fairly proficient at it and I don't get nervous at all. So there's quite a travel. And I think that's where we're looking at our audience to make that trip. While most are very uncomfortable, you can get to the point where it's very comfortable and enjoyable to do so.
And the enjoyment comes when you're comfortable doing it. You've done it enough that you know what to expect. And that adrenaline rush that you get before it is now exciting instead of terrifying.
To start off with, we like to give a definition. When I talk about giving a speech to an audience, you're basically preparing and presenting information or ideas in a structured and deliberate manner. And your aim is to inform, persuade, and or entertain listeners. And you're using verbal and nonverbal communications in this presentation.
That's a pretty comprehensive look at it.
I'd like to start off with preparing for the speech. What are the fundamentals? Where I always start, and it's the same thing when we start about starting a business or developing a product, I want to understand my audience. Who's in front of me? Because if you don't understand who's in front of you, you're guessing at how you can deliver. And there's a big distinction if you're presenting in front of savvy, experienced executives versus if you're presenting in front of a high school group. That's a totally different animal. You could have the same topic. If you don't understand that, your presentation will probably go over flat on one or both.
I like that you're starting with the audience because most likely if you don't have that in mind, you're going to be giving a speech to somewhere in the middle of those two groups, and you're not going to land either on the appropriate level of humor or the jargon that you're putting into your presentation. Understanding your audience is absolutely critical because everyone's expecting something different.
Definitely. And that follows in with what I was thinking of next is, what is the level of knowledge on the topic of your audience? Because that goes to how deeply you dig down or how broadly you start. And then also with the audience, you want to understand what they hope to gain from the presentation. It's not about you, it's about the audience.
Everyone's been in a speech where someone is using way too specific language or jargon, and you have no idea what they're talking about. It's incredibly boring to be in that audience. I would say most people have also experienced the opposite, where somebody is using too dumbed down language or layman's terms, and they're not engaging you at all because they're not really talking about anything specific enough. Understanding where you need to fall in that spectrum is really going to make sure that the audience is paying attention.
Starting to understand your audience is critical before you even walk on the stage. When you walk onto the stage, the key components of a successful speech, it's very important before you utter a word, how you walk on the stage. Let's assume that you're walking to a podium. I see many people running to the podium. It's like, oh my God, I've got to start. Some people will start talking before they hit the microphone. And it's like, I'm going to get this thing started. I recommend people walk out there slowly and confidently. How you approach it, you want to exude that confidence, like you own the place, whether you feel that way or not. Practice exuding that you own the place. And the technique I like, I'll walk up to the podium. I won't say a word. I'll look at the audience and I break them up into 3 parts, left, middle, and right. And I will smile at the audience and just glance across left, middle, right, smiling before I utter a word. I've been told by many people in the audience that just relaxes them. It's like, oh, this isn't going to be so uptight.
I don't know that I've ever done the 3 stages, but I definitely get up there. If I have any presentation materials, make sure that's there and then count to 10 slowly. When the adrenaline starts pumping, when everybody starts looking at you, if you don't count to 10, you just sort of wait until you feel like 10 seconds has passed. It's probably been 1 or 2 seconds and you're going to look like you're just jumping down the throat of the microphone.
Even before I walk on the stage, if I can, I like to walk on the stage, ideally the day before, and just look around and see what it's like. So it's an environment I'm familiar with.
That's big. Another one that helps with that is if somebody's presenting before you, if you can be behind the stage or next to the stage and start looking out then. The first time you're not seeing your audience is immediately when you're visible as well. That can help calm the nerves quite a lot.
It's interesting when you're following someone, I'm always rooting for the person to be terrible because then it's easier for me to be good. We have one of our podcasts where we interviewed Mr. Dave Rendall, and he is the best public speaker that I've ever seen personally in my life. And I have a standing rule. I refuse to follow him on a stage.
Yeah, there we go. He actually came and presented at one of our classes. I remember being blown away by him.
Let's talk about the components when you start speaking. So we talked about just take your time, don't rush it, smile at the audience. But the first words out of your mouth, you want it to be a strong, attention-grabbing opening statement that clearly states a purpose. You want to give the audience a reason to listen to you.
Without a doubt, that attention-grabbing statement is absolutely key. People that nail that, the rest of the speech can actually be pretty mediocre, but people will remember that. Whereas someone could have a fantastically written speech, but if they don't engage you initially, everybody gets a little restless between presenters. You might start looking around, you might start a conversation, and then all of a sudden you realize they're talking and your brain never really switches into the gear of paying attention.
And there's different techniques to doing that. We've done episodes on using a data point as a compelling impact statement to listen. We've done one on storytelling. The technique that I use is I will use humor. I'll tell a story that is funny and tie it into the message, and then I will make the transition from the story to what the topic is about. But I will put a caveat on that. If you are not naturally funny, do not do that, because you will come over so lame, and no matter what you say after, your presentation will bomb.
Yeah, for instance, I have never once ever and will not ever start a presentation with humor. I would never start it that way. I like the more fact-based, something that'll make you think differently form of grabbing people's attention.
It's a great point because you and I have different styles and we have different components to how we can deport ourselves and present. You want to look at what is your style. Don't force someone else's style onto yourself. I was at a presentation one time with I won't mention the person's name, obviously, but it was in front of some very top level executives. And he was a high level executive in the organization I was with. And he was not funny. And he had heard that start off with a joke. And he went out and bought a book about jokes.
Oh, no.
He told like 4 jokes in a row. And I was sitting next to the person who organized this. And he's like, what is he doing? It was terrible.
That's hard. It's hard to watch when that kind of stuff happens as well.
Understand who you are and understand there's different styles you can use. It's not a one style fits all, and play around with it and see how it works. Also, from that point, you want to, in your presentation, you want to have each point logically build on to the next so that you can support your main message and it flows into the conclusion. So that flow is useful for the audience to understand and follow along with you, and they will follow along with you.
Without a doubt, building on the speech helps a lot. Again, we can highlight all the negative examples, but I'm sure we've all listened to somebody that jumps around, or it seems like every time they look at their note card, the next sentence out of their mouth is something entirely unrelated to what they were just talking about because they're jumping from topic to topic. The idea is to bring the audience on that journey with you.
To conclude, you want something that reinforces the key points and leaves a lasting impression. Work very hard on that conclusion. Don't just say, and that's it, I'm done, and walk off. That's just terrible. The worst presentation I've ever personally experienced in my life was by a gentleman who wrote a book, and I won't mention that name either. It was a very famous book, but there was 100 points on how to accomplish what the book was about. And he read every single one of the 100. We were in the audience dying. And when it came to number 100, you could feel a gasp of breath from the audience. Then he said, and this is my point about conclusion. And he said, and as a bonus, I've got 10 others. People ran out of the room when he said that.
That's hilarious.
So that is an example of extreme. Don't have a bad conclusion. When you have people running away from you, that would be an indicator that you have not successfully concluded.
Right. A technique that I often use that is fully deployable by anybody is grab the attention, state everything you're going to talk about during the speech, give your speech, and then state again what you just talked about. Although that seems like the most simple speech formula, I have found it to be really effective because people will remember the key points that you talked about in the beginning and the end, and then the quality of the middle. It leaves a lasting impression.
It's a strategy that I've utilized. It's called the TELM strategy, TEL''EM. And the theory behind that is tell the audience what you're about to tell them, tell the audience. And the third one is tell the audience what you just told them. And you repeat it 3 times. And if you listen to commercials and they'll say, dial 1-800, dial 1-800, dial 1-800, they repeat it 3 times. Research has shown that repetition reinforces the message.
Brilliant. I didn't even know that had a name.
Look at that. You learn something new every day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's effective, though. It really does work.
You mentioned that you think that I'm a decent presenter. What I would advise people to do is to analyze it, because I question how good I am in all honesty, but I keep getting asked by the same group to speak again and again and again. That's a great sign. It's easy to get asked once. Getting asked the second time, the third time, that'll tell you something. I was really curious. I started breaking it down. Why do people want me to speak? And I broke it down to 3 simple parts. And I recommend anyone analyze what is it that people like and dislike about what you're doing. But the 3 points, it's not complicated. One is that I bring humor and I make the audience laugh. The second is I have content that's worth listening to. But a lot of people have content. But the third, I think, is the most important. I really think that's the key to what I'm doing is people have told me that they're very relaxed when they hear me speak, that I relax the audience. I don't give a speech. I speak as if I'm speaking to you one-on-one. I just speak to an individual. Now, some people can give a, quote, prepared speech and read it and sound so dynamic. I suck at that. That takes a lot of practice. What I do is I'm just myself when I speak, and I just talk to the audience as if I'm talking to one person. What's important with that is by relaxing the audience, I come across as very natural because it's natural to be me. If I try to be someone else, then it comes across as unnatural, and people tend to tighten up. Unless you really want to hone yourself to a fine level, just starting, I would say, just be yourself. Don't try to be someone else. Don't try to give a speech. Just talk to the audience. For those who aspire to go higher in their entrepreneurial journey, we've got something just for you. Coming up next.
Ready to discover what makes you a unique entrepreneur? Let's find out with the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment. Imagine a tool that reveals your unique entrepreneurial tendencies in just 20 minutes. The Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment does just that. Drawing upon decades of in-depth research since 1983 on entrepreneurial orientation and developed by a team of entrepreneurship experts, The Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment is a pioneering tool that delves into 7 essential entrepreneurial tendencies. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or looking to make a bigger impact in your present field, the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment offers invaluable insights tailored just for you. Remember, it's not about scoring high, it's about discovering your unique potential. So why wait? Dive in and unleash your entrepreneurial spirit. Take the Janus Entrepreneurial Assessment today at profspirit.com and start your journey towards success.
Now, let's dive back into our journey of entrepreneurial insights.
Yeah, you've highlighted another point there, and that's the style of preparation. Some people really love printing their speech, like they have a pre-prepared document that they are presenting. I cannot do that. I have to have overarching bullet points of what I want to cover, and I fill the rest in because I've practiced it. I've rehearsed it. I know how they fit together, but it's not going to be rote memorization. And I do that because I've given rote memorization speeches enough times to realize if you get distracted, if you get off, it's over. It's really hard to get back onto that rote memorized speech. However, if you're giving bullet points and you misspeak, say something tangential, really easy just to get back on the next bullet point.
Yeah, especially if you know the topic, because I use the bullet points and people have seen my notes and they're just like, you only have like 5 things written and you spoke for 30 minutes.
Correct.
And when they questioned my preparation, they said, how prepared were you for this? And I said, well, I've only been preparing for 30 years.
Yeah. You know the topic well at this point.
That is very helpful as you're speaking on something that you know about. I would not try to speak about something I don't know about. I come across as not looking for a professional.
Right.
An area we haven't talked about, which I think is very important, is body language. So it's not just the verbal, it's the nonverbal. And as I mentioned, coming across the stage like you own the place, confident, work on being relaxed. And I would recommend in preparation to videotape yourself, even doing something as simple as that. Then get feedback from people who are watching and say, how do I look? How am I coming across? And you can actually practice the nonverbal skills. In addition to, I would suggest record yourself speaking and give yourself analysis and get feedback from other people so you can improve. But most people video the actual words and not just how they look.
That's really great feedback. I've heard a lot of the similar with look in the mirror, stand in front of as big of a mirror as you can, full length mirror would be ideal, and give your speech that way. Because a lot of people find, and I have found this in speeches before, the second you sort of make eye contact with somebody, it can throw you off pretty dramatically. Inevitably, you'll do it with an audience member on accident, on purpose. By looking in the mirror, you're practicing that engaging and unengaging of eye contact and not interrupting yourself, essentially.
There's 2 points to that I'd like to make. One is when I'm speaking, I mentioned I break the audience up into 3 parts, but I actually look over their heads. I don't look at the audience, I look over their heads. From the audience, it looks like I'm looking at them. And I've had people, including students in the classroom, people in the audience say, I better pay attention. He keeps looking at me, where I'm really not. And it's an interesting technique. But now with eye contact, there's one exception I will say to making eye contact. If it's possible, if I'm speaking, if I have a chance to engage with participants, I will look at someone in the front. I will go up and talk to a few people and get a quick connection. So if I get a little bit nervous or if I get discombobulated, if you will, that's a word you don't hear often, I will look at that person and it just relaxes me because I just made a quick bond with someone and they tend to smile back at you because you've made a quick connection. So I've used that technique too.
That's a good one. Anything you can do to get on track or put safeguards up to make sure you stay there.
Engaging with the audience is the last point that I wanted to make. Those are types of components that you could use to engage with the audience. While I'm not looking directly at people, I like to see what the audience is doing. Are they shuffling? Are they leaning forward? You should be able to see whether they're listening and engaged. If not, I will try to shift directions, but that's risky. And I want to advise someone starting off to do that, but you want to be able to pivot, which is why I like to look at bullet points. I had someone one time that was speaking in front of their organization and they were a control freak. The night before they said, hey, could you email your presentation to me? I'd like to review it to see if we need to make any adjustments. And when I was done laughing at them, they said, why are you laughing? I said, I don't write a speech, and they panicked. But after I gave the presentation, they came up and they said, how did you do that? So those are my thoughts on giving a speech and different techniques you can use to make yourself effective. Any final thoughts?
Practice makes perfect. We end a lot of episodes by saying that similar thing, but this really holds true. Practice makes perfect. You're not going to have that many opportunities in your life to present in front of thousands of people or hundreds of people, but you'll probably have hundreds of experiences in front of dozens of people. So just take advantage of those.
And I would use 3 terms: preparation, practice, and audience engagement. Those would be the 3 areas I would focus on. And as you said, practice, set yourself in scenarios to give speeches in non-threatening environments, non-low impact environments, just to practice. And you had also mentioned in a previous episode, the organization Toastmasters. Seek out Toastmasters in your neighborhood. That's a great starting point also.
It really is. They're incredible. They often have very good mentors. I can't talk about your specific branch, but at all of the Toastmasters events I've gone to, there have been people really willing to help.
And I would advise our audience, just have fun when you're speaking. Don't freak out. And I know that's easier said than done, but as you keep doing it, you become more comfortable.
Without a doubt.
Well, on that, let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
We extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Check out profspirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.